I never believed in monsters until I became their target. What started as protecting my farm turned into the worst night of my life. The creature I shot didn't just want revenge, it wanted to make sure I understood who really owned those woods. And it almost succeeded. This is the story of how I lost everything in a single night, and why I'll never go near a forest again. My farm sits at the edge of the Pacific Northwest Forest, about 15 miles from the nearest town. It's not much, just me, my wife, our 2 young kids, and around 20 head of cattle. We've been working this land for over 10 years now. The farm isn't big, maybe 40 acres of pasture with another 20 in woods, but it's ours. We built the house ourselves, put up the fences, cleared the fields. Every post, every board represents years of backbreaking work. We never had problems with predators before. Sure, the occasional coyote would sniff around the chicken coop at night, and once we had a black bear get into the garbage, but nothing serious. Nothing that required more than some better fencing and making sure we didn't leave food out. The forest behind us is thick and dense, the kind where you can't see more than 20 feet in any direction. Old growth pines mixed with cedar and hemlock create a canopy so thick that even at noon it looks like twilight in there. The forest goes on for miles without a single road cutting through it. Most folks around here avoid going too deep. There's plenty of stories about hunters getting lost, hikers disappearing, but I always figured those were just urban legends, the kind of tales people tell to scare each other around campfires. About 3 weeks before everything went to hell, I started noticing things. Small things at first, the kind you can easily dismiss if you're not paying attention. Footprints near the fence line that were way too big to be human. At least 18 inches long, maybe more. I measured them against my own boot for comparison, and they dwarfed mine. The stride between them was longer than any bear I'd ever tracked, and I've tracked plenty. Each step was at least 4 feet apart, sometimes 5. The prints had 5 toes, kind of human-shaped, but the proportions were all wrong. The big toe was positioned differently, more to the side. The arch was deeper, and whatever made them was heavy. The impressions in the soft ground near the stream were at least 2 inches deep. I figured it was a bear at first. Had to be, right? What else could leave prints that big? But bears don't walk that far on 2 legs. These prints showed a consistent 2-legged gait going on for hundreds of yards along the fence line. No paw prints mixed in, no sign of it dropping to all 4s. Just these massive bipedal tracks, one after another. Still, I told myself there had to be a logical explanation. Maybe it was a bear with an injured front leg, forcing it to walk upright longer than normal. Maybe the prints look weird because of how the mud dried. I've lived in these mountains long enough to know that nature can play tricks on you. Your eyes can deceive you, so I didn't think too much about it at first. The cattle started acting strange around that time. Cows are creatures of habit. They graze the same areas, follow the same paths to water, bed down in the same spots each night. But suddenly they refused to go anywhere near the forest edge. They'd always grazed in that section without issue. The grass grew thicker there because of the shade and moisture from the trees. But now they wanted nothing to do with it. If I tried to herd them that direction, they'd balk, digging in their hooves and refusing to move. At night, they'd huddle together at the far end of the pasture, as far from the trees as possible. 20 head of cattle pressed together like they were trying to hide from something. I've raised cattle long enough to know when they're scared, and these animals were terrified. They'd stand facing the forest, ears forward, completely still. Not grazing, not moving, just watching. Sometimes one would low nervously and the others would press closer together. At night, they'd barely sleep. I'd come out at 2 a.m. to check on a cow due to calf and find the whole herd awake, alert, staring at those trees like they expected something to come charging out at any moment. Then came the smell. On certain evenings, usually when the wind was blowing in from the forest, this musky odor would drift across the property. It wasn't like anything I'd encountered before. Not the rotten smell of a dead animal, not the sharp ammonia scent of skunk, not the doggy smell of bear. Something else entirely, something that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. It was thick, almost overwhelming at times, like a wet dog mixed with something wild and wrong. Once it got in your nose, you couldn't get rid of it. The smell would linger in your nostrils for hours. My wife started mentioning hearing howls at night. Not coyotes, not wolves. We both know what those sound like. We hear them all the time out here. These were different. Deeper, longer, almost like they had a pattern to them. She'd wake me up in the middle of the night, gripping my arm, whispering that she heard it again. At first I'd tell her she was dreaming, but then I started hearing them too. They'd start far away, deep in the forest, then get closer. Sometimes they'd circle the property, coming from different directions. The howls would last 10 or 15 seconds, rising and falling in pitch. They sounded almost like communication, like whatever was making them was calling to others of its kind. The kids started complaining about seeing a tall shadow watching from the woods during sunset. My daughter, who's 8, refused to play outside unless we were right there with her. My son, who's only 6, started having nightmares about a dark man in the trees. I brushed it off as their imaginations running wild, kids being kids, but part of me wondered. Part of me had started to feel watched too. That prickling sensation on the back of your neck that tells you you're not alone. I'd be out fixing fence posts or moving hay and suddenly feel like someone was staring at me. I'd turn around and see nothing but trees, but the feeling wouldn't go away. By the second week, I couldn't ignore it anymore. Found the fence damaged one morning when I went out to let the cows into the pasture. 3 posts snapped clean in half. These weren't thin posts. They were 6-inch treated pine sunk 3 feet into the ground. Not knocked over by wind or a vehicle, but twisted and broken with what must have been incredible force. The wood fibers were torn apart, splinters everywhere. The metal wire fencing was ripped apart like it was tissue paper, the thick gauge wire that's supposed to hold back a ton of cattle just torn to pieces. I stood there looking at the damage, trying to make sense of it. A vehicle couldn't have gotten back there, no tire tracks, no oil stains, nothing. An animal couldn't have done it either. Even a bear doesn't have that kind of strength. I've seen what bears can do to fences, and it doesn't look like this. This looked like something had just grabbed the posts and snapped them, pulled the wire apart with its hands. But what could possibly be strong enough to do that? The cows wouldn't graze anywhere near the forest edge now, even in broad daylight. The section with the best grass sat empty. I tried moving them closer, thinking maybe they'd forget their fear if they saw the sweet clover growing there, but they refused. Absolutely refused. They'd panic, eyes rolling white, bellowing and pushing against each other to get away. I gave up after one cow nearly trampled her calf trying to escape. Then I found trees with bark stripped off at 8 or 9 feet high, long claw marks gouged into the wood, deep enough that sap was still oozing out, too high for any bear. The highest I've ever seen a bear mark a tree is maybe 6 feet, and that's when they're really stretching. These marks were different anyway. Bears leave parallel scratches from their claws. These looked more like something had dragged its fingers down the trunk, gouging out chunks of bark and wood. 3 or 4 marks, spaced like fingers. Each one was at least an inch deep into the heartwood. I drove over to my neighbor's place about 2 miles down the road, needing to talk to someone about what was happening. He's an old-timer, been living in these mountains for 40 years. If anyone would have an explanation, it would be him. He was out in his yard when I pulled up, and before I could even say anything, he mentioned his dog had been going crazy every night. Said it would stand at the back door barking at the woods until it lost its voice, wouldn't calm down no matter what he did. He'd had to bring the dog inside just to get any sleep. The strange thing was, his dog was a hunting dog, trained to track bears and mountain lions. Nothing scared that dog. But now it wouldn't even go near the tree line during the day. Another neighbor, a woman who raises chickens about 3 miles up the valley, reported finding several of her birds dead. Not eaten, just killed. Scattered around the coop like someone had tossed them. No signs of a fox or raccoon, no evidence of any normal predator. The coop door was torn off its hinges and the birds were just lying there in the yard, necks broken but otherwise untouched. She'd lost 12 chickens in one night. Whatever killed them wasn't interested in food. It just seemed to enjoy the killing. At the hardware store in town, I mentioned what was happening to the owner while I was picking up supplies to repair the fence. He nodded slowly, didn't seem surprised at all, and casually mentioned others had been reporting strange activity. Missing livestock, damaged property, weird sounds in the night. He said it with this knowing look in his eyes, like he'd heard these stories before. Like he knew exactly what was happening, but didn't want to say it out loud. That's when I started to realize this wasn't just happening to me. This was affecting multiple properties, multiple families. Something was moving through the area, and whatever it was big, strong, and getting bolder. I started staying up at night with binoculars, watching the tree line from the bedroom window. I'd position myself in a chair by the window, lights off, just watching and waiting. For hours, I'd see nothing but darkness and shadows. The forest was like a black wall at night, impossible to see into more than a few feet. But I could feel it, that sensation of being watched, like someone's eyes are boring into you. My skin would crawl, and I'd scan the trees with the binoculars, finding nothing but darkness. It was the early hours of the morning, maybe 2 or 3, when I caught movement. Something massive shifting between the trees, moving with an odd upright gait, not the 4-legged lope of a bear or the quick darting of a deer. This was bipedal, walking like a man but bigger. Much bigger. It was there for just a second before disappearing behind a thick pine. Too large to be a person, too tall to be any animal I knew. My heart was already pounding, but I grabbed my flashlight and aimed it toward the spot where I'd seen the movement. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating tree trunks and underbrush. Then I saw them. 2 eyes reflected back at me from about 7 or 8 feet off the ground. Not the green-yellow glow of a deer's eyes or the red reflection of a predator. These were different. Dark amber, catching the light and throwing it back. They were spaced wide apart, too far apart to be human, and they held my gaze for several seconds. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. In that moment, I understood what prey feels like when it's being hunted. Those eyes weren't startled or afraid. They were calm, assessing, intelligent. They watched me with an awareness that made my blood run cold. Then they vanished, and whatever had been watching me melted back into the darkness. No sound, no rustling branches, nothing. Just gone. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. I sat there for the rest of the night, flashlight in hand, jumping at every sound. Told myself it was a trick of the light, that my mind was playing tricks on me, that I was seeing things because I was tired and scared. But I knew what I'd seen. Something was out there. Something big. Something that walked on 2 legs and watched us from the shadows. And it was getting closer to the house each night. The next evening we had dinner as a family, but the atmosphere was tense. The kids were nervous, pushing food around their plates without eating much. They wouldn't go outside after dark anymore, not even to take the trash out to the bin by the barn. My daughter kept glancing at the windows like she expected to see something looking back at her. My son was pale, dark circles under his eyes from not sleeping well. My wife finally brought up what we'd both been thinking. She suggested calling someone for help, but who would we call? The sheriff's department? And tell them what? That something was lurking in the woods? That we had a feeling we were being stalked? Without evidence, without bodies or clear damage, what could they even do? Come out and walk around with flashlights? Tell us there was nothing to worry about? We'd sound crazy. The kind of people who call the police because they heard a noise in the night. I loaded my hunting rifle after the kids went to bed, a .30-06 that I'd used for years to hunt elk and deer. It's a powerful weapon, capable of dropping a bull elk at 300 yards. I kept it by the bedroom door, a full magazine loaded and the safety on. Told myself I was being paranoid, that I probably wouldn't need it. But having it there made me feel slightly less helpless. Through the night, I heard heavy footsteps circling the property, not the light patter of a deer or the shuffling of a bear. These were deliberate, methodical steps. Something large was moving around out there, testing the perimeter. I'd hear them on the north side of the house, then minutes later they'd be on the south side. Whatever it was circling us, learning the layout. Something large kept brushing against the barn walls. I could hear the wooden boards creaking under the pressure. Then I'd hear it at the chicken coop, then at the equipment shed, moving from structure to structure like it was inspecting everything. The cows were bellowing in distress, that panicked sound they make when they sense a predator nearby. The sound went on for hours. I went to the window several times, peering out into the darkness. My wife stood behind me, clutching my arm. But we couldn't see anything, just darkness, the shapes of buildings and stars overhead. The sounds were there. The footsteps, the brushing against structures, the distressed animals. But whatever was making them stayed hidden, just outside the reach of the porch lights. I must have dozed off in the chair by the window around 5 in the morning. When I woke at dawn, the first thing I noticed was the silence. Complete silence. Not the normal morning quiet where you can hear birds starting to sing and insects beginning to buzz. This was different, unnaturally quiet, like every living thing in the area was holding its breath. I stepped outside into the gray morning light. The air was cold and still, no wind, no sound, nothing. The wrongness of it made my skin prickle. Then I noticed the main gate to the pasture. It was hanging open, swinging slightly on one remaining hinge. The other hinge was completely torn off. I walked closer, my boots crunching on the gravel driveway. The gate wasn't just open, it was destroyed. This gate was solid steel tubing, meant to hold back 1,000 pounds of cattle pushing against it. The thick metal was bent like it was aluminum foil. One section was twisted completely around on itself. Whatever had done this possessed strength I couldn't even comprehend. Most of the cows were at the far end of the pasture, huddled against the fence. They were pressed together so tightly they looked like one massive brown hide. I could see the whites of their eyes even from 100 yards away. I started counting heads, my stomach sinking with each number. 19. There should have been 20. One was missing. Bessie, my best heifer, a 2-year-old Angus cross that I'd been planning to breed this spring. She was worth more than 3 months of our income. More than that, she was healthy, gentle, and would have been a good mother cow for years to come. Without her, we'd struggle to make ends meet this year. Every animal counts when you're running a small operation like ours. I found the drag marks immediately. Massive gouges in the dirt and grass leading straight into the forest. The marks were at least 2 feet wide, showing where something had dragged an 800-pound cow across the pasture like it weighed nothing. The grass was torn up, leaving bare dirt in parallel tracks. A blood trail followed the drag marks, dark and still wet. Not just drops, but thick smears where the injured animal had been pulled along the ground. Standing there looking at those drag marks, I had a choice to make. Let the cow go, write off the loss, and count myself lucky it wasn't worse. Or go after it, try to save her if she was still alive, or at least recover the meat if she wasn't. 3 months of income versus my safety, my family's financial stability versus whatever was in those woods. I knew I couldn't afford to lose that cow. We were barely making it as it was. 1 bad month and we'd be dipping into savings. 3 bad months and we'd be talking about selling the place. My wife begged me not to go into the woods alone. She stood on the porch with tears in her eyes, telling me the cow wasn't worth it, that we'd figure something out. But I could see in her face that she understood. We needed that animal. I promised her I'd be careful. Went back inside and gathered my gear. The hunting rifle, a full box of extra ammunition that I stuffed in my jacket pockets, my hunting knife, flashlight, and a bottle of water. I told her if I wasn't back in 2 hours to drive to town and get help. She nodded, still crying, and kissed me. The kids were awake now, standing in the hallway in their pajamas. They looked so small and scared. They watched from the window as I crossed the pasture toward the trees, their pale faces pressed against the glass, my daughter holding her little brother's hand. I gave them a wave, trying to look confident, like this was no big deal, just going to fetch our cow, be back soon. But my hands were shaking and my heart was already racing. The musky smell hit me the moment I stepped into the tree line. It was overwhelming this close to the source, thick enough to taste in the back of my throat. I had to fight the urge to gag. The forest was darker than I remembered, even though the sun was up now. The canopy blocked most of the light, leaving everything in a murky twilight. Shadows moved and shifted as branches swayed in a breeze I couldn't feel down at ground level. The blood trail was easy to follow at first. Deep gouges in the earth showed where something incredibly strong had dragged my cow uphill without any apparent effort. The trail went straight up a slope that would have had me breathing hard, but whatever took the cow hadn't slowed down at all. The drag marks were consistent, showing steady movement. I stopped frequently to listen, pressing my back against tree trunks and scanning the forest around me. But I heard nothing except my own breathing and the occasional creak of branches overhead. The normal forest sounds were absent. No squirrels chattering, no birds singing, no insects buzzing. It was like the entire forest was holding its breath, waiting. I noticed broken branches 8 or 9 feet high, sometimes higher. They weren't just cracked, but completely snapped off, the wood splintered and hanging. Whatever had passed through here was tall and hadn't been watching where it was going. Or maybe it just didn't care about the noise, didn't fear anything enough to move quietly. The feeling of being watched grew stronger with each step deeper into the forest. The hair on the back of my neck was standing up. I found myself looking over my shoulder every few seconds, sure I'd see something following me. But there was never anything there, just trees and shadows and that overwhelming smell. I found tufts of coarse dark hair caught on the branches. The hair was thick and wiry, almost like steel wool, not like any animal I knew. Bear fur is softer, deer hair is hollow and breaks easily. This was different, strong enough to catch on bark and stay there. I pulled a tuft loose and rolled it between my fingers. It was at least 6 inches long, dark brown to black, with a weird oily texture. The trail led me almost a mile into the woods, farther than I'd ever been on this part of my property. I'd hunted these woods before, but always stayed closer to the edge. This was deep forest, the kind where you can't see the sky anymore and the trees are so thick that you have to push through them. The terrain got rougher with rocky outcrops jutting up through the soil and fallen trees creating barriers I had to climb over or go around. The blood trail became heavier the farther I went. Whatever had wounded the cow had done it badly, great splashes of blood on tree trunks and rocks. The cow must have been bleeding out as she was dragged. Part of me hoped she'd already died, that she wasn't suffering. The other part hoped she was still alive, that I could save her somehow. Then I heard it, a low rumbling sound ahead like deep breathing, heavy and rhythmic. I froze mid-step, not even daring to breathe myself. The sound was coming from just ahead, maybe 50 yards. I gripped my rifle tighter, finger moving from the trigger guard to rest lightly on the trigger itself. The forest opened into a small clearing. Natural light filtered down through a gap in the canopy. And there, in the center of the clearing, was my worst nightmare. My cow lay in the center of the clearing, or what was left of her. The animal had been completely torn apart with what could only be bare hands. The hide was peeled back in strips, ribs exposed and cracked open. Massive bite marks covered the haunches, chunks of meat ripped away and scattered around the clearing. The head was twisted at an impossible angle, neck clearly broken. Blood was everywhere, soaking into the ground, painting the grass and rocks. Standing over the carcass, feeding, was the creature. It was massive, at least 8 feet tall, maybe closer to 9. Every inch of it was covered in dark brown fur that was almost black in the shadowy clearing. The shoulders were impossibly broad, wider than any man, wider than seemed physically possible. The arms were thick as tree trunks and hung past its knees, ending in huge hands with fingers as thick as sausages. The legs were bent in a way that looked wrong, like it was perpetually crouched even when standing. The face was the worst part. It was flat, somewhat human, but wrong in every detail. The brow ridge was pronounced, jutting out over deep-set eyes. The nose was broad and flat against the face. The jaw was heavy and protruded slightly, showing large teeth stained with blood. No snout like a bear, no muzzle like a primate. Something in between, something that shouldn't exist. It was feeding on my cow, making satisfied grunting noises as it tore into the meat with its teeth and hands. The sounds were horrible, wet tearing, bones cracking, that deep rumbling coming from its chest. It held a chunk of meat in both hands, raising it to its mouth like a person eating a sandwich. I froze completely, couldn't move, couldn't think, couldn't breathe. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to run, to get away, to flee as fast as my legs could carry me. But I couldn't make my body obey. I just stood there, rooted to the spot, watching this impossible thing eat my cow. The creature suddenly stopped eating. Slowly, deliberately, it turned its head toward me. The movement was almost casual, like it had known I was there the whole time and was just now deciding to acknowledge my presence. Our eyes met across the clearing. Maybe 50 feet between us, but it felt like inches. The creature's eyes were dark, nearly black, with just a hint of amber around the edges. They were intelligent. That's what scared me most. These weren't the eyes of an animal acting on instinct. There was thought behind them, calculation, awareness. It was looking at me the way I might look at an insect. Insignificant, barely worth noticing. It didn't seem surprised or afraid, just annoyed, like I'd interrupted its meal and now it had to deal with me. It straightened up to its full height, rising from its crouch, and I realized it was even bigger than I'd thought. 9 feet easy, maybe more. Blood dripped from its mouth and hands. I raised my rifle with hands that were shaking so badly I could barely aim. My voice cracked as I yelled at it to get away, to leave, to go. The words came out high and scared, not commanding at all. The creature didn't move. It just kept staring at me with those dark, knowing eyes, waiting to see what I'd do next. I fired a warning shot into the air. The crack of the rifle was deafening in the quiet clearing, echoing off the trees and rocks. The creature flinched at the sound, its head jerking slightly, but it didn't flee, didn't run, didn't even back up. Instead, it stood to its full height, rose up on those massive legs until it towered over everything in the clearing. At least 9 feet tall, maybe 10. its shoulders blocked out the light filtering down from above. The fur on its body stood up, making it look even bigger, even more imposing. It made a low, rumbling growl that I felt in my chest. The sound vibrated through my entire body, resonating in my bones. Not just a noise, but a physical sensation, like standing next to a subwoofer at a concert. The trees seemed to shake with it. Birds that I hadn't even realized were hiding in the canopy burst into flight, fleeing in panic. I aimed at its torso, center mass, the way I'd been taught to shoot. My finger tightened on the trigger. The rifle kicked hard against my shoulder. The bullet hit the creature's shoulder, punching through the fur. Dark blood appeared, matting the hair around the wound. The creature stumbled back a step from the impact. For a second, I thought that was it. I'd shot it, wounded it, and it would run away. But then it touched the wound with one massive hand, brought the hand up to its face and looked at its own blood, dark and thick, coating its fingers. Then it looked back at me. The expression on its face changed from annoyance to something else, pure rage, fury like I'd never seen. Its lips pulled back, showing teeth that were too large, too sharp. It opened its mouth wide and released a roar that shook leaves from the trees. The sound was deafening, primal, unlike anything I'd ever heard. It filled the entire clearing, seemed to come from everywhere at once. It filled me with animal terror, the kind that's written into our DNA from when our ancestors were prey. The creature dropped to all fours. The movement was fluid, natural, like it could move just as easily on 4 legs as on 2. And then it charged, straight at me, covering the distance faster than anything that size should be able to move. I turned and ran. Didn't think, didn't aim for another shot, just turned and ran as fast as my legs could move. Crashed through the undergrowth without looking back, without caring about the noise I was making. Branches whipped my face, drawing blood. Thorns tore at my jacket and pants. I stumbled over roots, caught myself, kept running. I could hear the creature behind me. The sound was terrifying. Trees cracking and splintering as it smashed through them like they were saplings. The thunder of its footsteps shaking the ground. Its breathing, heavy and rhythmic, getting closer. It was fast, impossibly fast for something so large. Faster than me even running for my life. I fired another shot blindly behind me without looking, without aiming. Just pointed the rifle backward over my shoulder and pulled the trigger, hoping to slow it down. I heard the roar intensify, closer now. The creature's breathing was right behind me, hot breath on the back of my neck. I could smell it, that overwhelming musky smell mixed with blood and raw meat. Branches continued to whip my face. I could taste blood in my mouth from where one had split my lip. Roots seemed to reach up and try to trip me with every step. The creature's breathing was getting louder, closer. I realized with horror it wasn't even trying its hardest. It could have caught me already. It was playing with me, like a cat playing with a mouse before the kill. Something massive slammed into my back. The impact lifted me off my feet and sent me flying through the air. I hit the ground hard, rolled, felt rocks and roots jabbing into me. The rifle was knocked from my hands, went skittering across the forest floor. The wind was driven from my lungs. I couldn't breathe, couldn't see straight. My vision swam with black spots. I rolled onto my back, gasping for air, and saw the creature looming over me. It blocked out the sky completely. Up close, it was even more massive than I'd thought. The arms were like tree trunks, thick with muscle under the fur. The chest was barrel-shaped, rising and falling with each breath. The face was terrifying, all angles and shadows, those dark eyes staring down at me without mercy. It grabbed my leg with one hand. The grip was like iron, fingers wrapping completely around my thigh. It lifted me off the ground like I weighed nothing, like I was a doll. held me upside down, my head hanging down, blood rushing to my face. Then it shook me violently. My whole body whipped back and forth. I felt something in my knee pop, ligaments tearing. The pain was incredible. Then it threw me, hurled me through the air like a rag doll. I hit a tree trunk hard enough to crack ribs. All the wind was knocked from my lungs again. I slid down the trunk and collapsed at its base. Could taste blood in my mouth, lots of it. My vision swam. Everything was blurry and dim. I thought I might pass out. The creature advanced slowly now, not in a hurry anymore. It had me and it knew it. The injured prey that couldn't escape, it made huffing sounds that almost sounded like laughter, deep chuffing sounds from its chest. It was enjoying this. I dragged myself backward, every movement sending spikes of pain through my body. My knee was useless, wouldn't support any weight. My ribs screamed with every breath. I searched desperately for my rifle, but couldn't see it. It must have landed in the undergrowth somewhere, too far to reach. My fingers closed around a large rock instead, roughly the size of a cantaloupe, jagged and heavy. As the creature reached for me again, those huge hands coming down to grab me, I swung the rock with all my strength, put everything I had left into it, connected with the side of its head with a solid thunk. The rock split in two from the force of the impact. The creature stumbled back, shaking its head. Momentarily stunned, blood appeared on its temple, matting the fur. It made a sound of surprise and confusion. I used those precious seconds to scramble to my feet. Every movement was agony, but adrenaline kept me moving. I spotted my rifle about 10 feet away and lunged for it. The creature recovered fast, too fast. It grabbed my ankle just as my fingers touched the rifle. That iron grip again, crushing. I kicked backward with my free leg, put my heel right into its face, connected with its nose. Felt something crunch. The creature let go with a roar of pain, and I snatched the rifle up. I fired point blank at its chest, less than 5 feet away. The bullet definitely hit. I saw the impact, saw the wound appear. But the creature only roared again. Didn't go down, didn't slow. It charged at me again, and I backed away, firing twice more as fast as I could work the bolt. One bullet grazed its arm, tearing a furrow through the fur and flesh. The other hit its side, punching through. The creature was bleeding now from multiple wounds. Dark blood matted its fur in several places, dripping onto the ground. But it wasn't slowing down. If anything, it seemed more enraged. The bullets were just making it angrier. I realized with horror that bullets weren't going to stop this thing. Not enough bullets anyway, and I was running out. I turned and ran again. Pain shot through my injured leg with each step. The knee couldn't support my full weight and kept wanting to buckle. I was slower now, limping badly. The creature pursued, but with more caution this time. It had learned the rifle could hurt it, was wary of getting shot again. That wariness bought me time. I fired my last few rounds backward as I ran. Didn't aim, just fired in its general direction. Heard one bullet hit a tree with a thunk. Another must have missed entirely. The last one hit something, heard the creature grunt, but it kept coming. I pulled the trigger again and heard the click of an empty chamber, out of ammunition. I was defenseless now except for the knife on my belt, and that would be useless against this thing. But the creature paused when I fired that last shot. Must have thought I still had bullets. That moment of hesitation gave me the lead I needed. I pushed through the pain and ran harder, knowing this was my only chance. I burst from the forest into the pasture, limping badly. My clothes were torn, covered in blood, both my own and the creature's. Every breath felt like knives in my ribs. My knee was swollen to twice its normal size. But I was in the open now, out of the trees. I looked back and saw the creature at the tree line. It had stopped, was just standing there in the shadows at the edge of the forest watching me. Didn't follow into the open, just stayed there among the trees, chest heaving, blood matting its fur in multiple places. Steam rose from its body in the cool morning air. Our eyes locked again across the distance. Maybe 200 yards between us now, I saw pure hatred in that gaze. And something else, intelligence. This wasn't just an animal acting on instinct. It was thinking, planning, calculating. The look it gave me was a promise. This wasn't over. I'd wounded it, hurt it, and it would remember. It would come back. I stumbled toward the house, unable to run anymore. Every step was agony. The remaining cows scattered as I passed, terrified by the smell of blood and fear on me. My wife rushed out onto the porch when she saw me. Her hand went to her mouth. I must have looked like death. She helped me inside, half carrying me, her hands shaking. Inside, I collapsed into a chair. Words tumbled out faster than I could think, trying to explain what happened, what I'd seen, what had chased me. It sounded insane even to my own ears. My wife didn't speak, just started cleaning my wounds with shaking hands. Her face was pale, eyes wide. My knee was swollen badly, the joint hot to the touch. Possibly torn ligaments, maybe worse. Multiple cuts covered my face and arms from branches. Bruises were already forming, dark purple, spreading across my ribs. I might have cracked one or two. Every breath hurt. My lip was split, still bleeding. I probably looked like I'd been in a car accident. The kids appeared in the doorway, drawn by the commotion. They were crying when they saw me, sensing the terror in both their parents. My wife sent them back to their room, told them everything would be okay, but her voice shook when she said it. We both knew nothing was okay. Whatever was out there in those woods, it was still there, and I'd made it angry. I looked at the clock and was shocked to see it was already late afternoon. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and red. The whole nightmare in the forest had taken hours, though it felt like minutes. Night was coming, and I had no doubt the creature would come with it. I told my family what was out there, tried to explain it in a way that wouldn't terrify them more than they already were. But how do you explain something like that? I could see my wife didn't want to believe me, wanted to think I'd been attacked by a bear or gotten disoriented and imagined things. But the fear in my eyes was real. The terror was real. She knew I wasn't lying, wasn't exaggerating. I'd seen something, and it had nearly killed me. We started boarding up the windows, used whatever we could find, sheets of plywood from the barn, 2x4s, even furniture pushed against the glass, nailed and screwed everything we could into place. My wife worked alongside me despite her fear, hammering boards while I held them. My injured knee made everything harder, but we kept working. We dragged furniture against the doors. The heavy oak dining table went against the front door, the couch against the back. Anything heavy, anything that might slow down something trying to get in. I knew in my heart it wouldn't be enough, not against that thing's strength, but we had to try. I reloaded my rifle with trembling hands, went to my gun safe, and pulled out every box of ammunition I had, counted them. Only about a dozen shells left. I'd used most of my ammo on what should have been a simple hunting trip last fall, never restocked. Now I was regretting that decision more than anything. 12 shots to defend my family against something I wasn't sure could be killed. We placed weapons throughout the house, the axe from the shed by the back door, kitchen knives within reach on counters, the baseball bat from the garage in the hallway, my hunting knife on the coffee table, anything that could be used as a weapon if it came to hand, though I knew if it came to that, we were already dead. We gathered in the living room as darkness fell, all 4 of us huddled together. Outside, we could hear the remaining cows making restless, anxious sounds. They knew. Animals always know when a predator is near. Our old dog, a German Shepherd that had been with us for 10 years, wouldn't stop barking at the back door. Deep, aggressive barks that went on and on until the dog's voice was hoarse. My wife held the children close. Their small faces were pale with fear, eyes wide. They'd never seen their parents like this, terrified and desperate. I positioned myself by the front window with the rifle, watching through a crack in the boards. Every shadow seemed to move. Every sound made us jump. The wind in the trees sounded like footsteps. The settling of the house sounded like something trying to get in. Hours passed in terrible silence. The children eventually fell asleep against their mother despite their fear, exhaustion taking over. My wife dozed off and on, jerking awake at every sound. I didn't sleep, couldn't sleep. Just sat there with the rifle across my lap, watching, waiting, knowing it would come. Around midnight, we heard it. Heavy footsteps circling the house, slow and deliberate, not trying to hide anymore. Each footfall was like thunder, shaking small objects on shelves. The creature was moving around the perimeter, methodically testing, learning the layout, finding weaknesses. I could hear deep breathing outside the walls, so close, just inches away on the other side of the wood and drywall. Heavy, rhythmic breathing like it was smelling us, tracking our scent. Something scraped against the siding, long, slow scrapes like nails or claws being dragged down the wooden boards. The sound made my teeth hurt. The dog's barking became absolutely frantic. It threw itself against the back door, clawing at the wood, desperate to get at whatever was out there. Or maybe desperate to get away, I couldn't tell. The barking reached a fever pitch, then suddenly stopped with a yelp, just cut off mid-bark. Silence. Then came a thud against the door. The whole frame shuddered. The table we'd pushed against it scraped backward an inch. Another thud. The door groaned, wood splintering. Whatever was out there was testing the door, seeing how strong it was. My wife pulled the children closer, putting her body between them and the door. I aimed the rifle, waiting. From the barn came a sound that froze our blood. The cows screaming. I'd never heard them make sounds like that before. High-pitched, terrified, almost human in their agony. Mixed with it was that terrible roar from the creature. The sound of destruction followed, wood splintering, metal being torn apart. The barn was being ripped apart. The screaming got worse, one cow after another, each one reaching that peak of terror and pain and then going silent. The silences were worse than the screaming. Each one marked another death, another animal gone. The massacre lasted 20 minutes that felt like hours. We sat there listening to it, helpless, knowing we could do nothing. When the last cow went silent, the night was eerily quiet for a moment. Then the footsteps resumed, coming back toward the house. The creature had killed every animal we owned, and now it was returning its attention to us. The creature returned to the house and started testing the boarded windows more aggressively, pushing against them with what felt like incredible pressure. The wood creaked and groaned, nails squealing as they tried to hold. The boards bowed inward. I could see them flexing through the cracks. We huddled in the center of the room, as far from the walls as possible. The children were awake now, crying silently. My wife was praying under her breath, words I couldn't make out, but the cadence was familiar. The Lord's Prayer, over and over. I kept the rifle trained on the door, knowing if it came through, I'd have maybe 1 or 2 shots before it was on us. A window board cracked with a sound like a gunshot. Moonlight streamed through the gap, painting a silver line across the floor. We all froze, staring at the crack. Then we saw it. A massive hand reached through the gap, feeling along the opening. The fingers were thick as sausages, covered in coarse fur, looking for a way to widen the gap, to tear the boards away. I aimed the rifle at the hand but didn't fire, couldn't waste the ammunition. The hand withdrew after a moment, but we knew it would be back. It was learning, testing, finding our weaknesses. For hours, the creature circled and tested our defenses. Sometimes it would go completely quiet, and we'd think it had left. We'd start to relax, to breathe easier. Then a sudden impact against a different wall would make us jump, hearts racing again. It was psychological warfare, and it was working. We were exhausted, terrified, jumping at every sound. Scraping sounds came from the roof. The creature was up there, walking around, testing the shingles. We could hear its weight creaking the rafters, trying to find a way in from above. My hands ached from gripping the rifle so long, knuckles white. My finger hovered over the trigger, ready to fire at the first sign of entry. The children were crying silently now, too scared to make noise. Fat tears rolled down their faces, but they made no sound. My daughter clutched her little brother, protective even in her own terror. My wife's lips moved in constant prayer, eyes closed. I was the only one still watching, waiting, knowing this couldn't last forever. Something had to give. The creature seemed to understand it was terrorizing us. It would go quiet for long periods, letting us think it might be over. Then it would suddenly slam against the house, shaking the walls. We heard it moving around the property again, destroying things. The sound of our truck being overturned, metal crunching, the tool shed being torn apart, boards ripping. Each crash made us flinch. It wanted us to know how powerless we were, that it could get to us whenever it decided to. Around 4 a.m, everything went completely silent. No movement, no sounds, no breathing or footsteps or scraping, nothing. Just complete silence. We waited with our hearts pounding, not daring to move, not daring to hope. Minutes dragged by like hours. Was it finally gone? Or was it waiting for us to let our guard down, to come out, to investigate? I didn't dare move from my post by the window, didn't dare take my eyes off the boarded up openings. The silence was somehow worse than the attacks. At least when it was making noise, we knew where it was, what it was doing. First light began to seep into the sky around 5:30, the faintest gray brightening the darkness. Still no sounds from outside. We remained frozen in our positions, not trusting the quiet. As it got lighter, we could see more through the cracks in the boards. The yard beyond was visible now in the pre-dawn light. The yard was destroyed, debris everywhere, but no sign of the creature. As the sun came up fully, painting the sky pink and orange, we started to believe it might really be gone. But none of us moved. We just sat there, watching, waiting, too scared to believe it was over. When full daylight came, bright and clear, we finally risked moving. I carefully removed one board from a window, nails screaming as I pried it loose. Looked out cautiously, half expecting to see the creature waiting. But the yard was empty except for debris. The devastation was total, complete. The barn was partially collapsed, one wall completely torn away. Support beams snapped like toothpicks. Every animal was dead. All 19 remaining cows scattered around the property, bodies torn apart. The chickens were gone, the coop destroyed. Our dog lay by the back door, neck broken. Bodies were scattered like discarded toys, thrown around with casual violence. Some were torn in half. Others had limbs ripped off. The ground was soaked with blood, dark and thick in the morning sun. Massive footprints were everywhere, pressed deep into the blood-soaked earth. Each print at least 20 inches long, 5-toed, showing the bipedal stride. But it was what I saw near the porch that made my blood run cold. In the dirt, barely visible in the churned earth, something was arranged, bones from the cattle, not scattered randomly but positioned deliberately. Placed in a pattern, ribs laid out in parallel lines, vertebrae stacked, a skull positioned at the center. It was a warning, a message. The creature had been here all night, right outside our door. Could have eventually broken through if it really wanted to. The boards wouldn't have held forever, but it chose not to. It chose to leave this instead. A reminder, it let us live. But only because it chose to. We were nothing to it. Just trespassers in its territory. We couldn't stay here. That was immediately clear. Every animal was dead. Our livelihood destroyed in one night. But more than that, we weren't safe. The creature knew where we lived, had marked us, would come back. My wife started packing bags while I kept watch, rifle still in hand. Her hands shook so badly she could barely fold clothes. We grabbed only essentials, clothes for a few days, important documents, birth certificates, deeds, insurance papers, what little money we had stashed away in the house, photos of the family. Everything else would have to stay. We couldn't take it all, and we didn't have time to sort through things. The children were in shock, moving like zombies, doing what they were told but barely responsive. Their faces were blank, eyes distant. They'd seen and heard things no child should experience. My daughter clutched her stuffed bear. My son held his blanket, small comforts against a nightmare. My truck was destroyed, completely flipped onto its side and then crushed. The cab was caved in, windows shattered, frame bent. The creature had picked it up and thrown it like it weighed nothing. But the old sedan still worked. My wife's car that we kept for errands in town, we loaded everything into it quickly, constantly checking the tree line. That musky smell still hung in the air, thick and cloying. A reminder that the creature had been here recently, might still be nearby, might be watching us right now from the shadows of the forest. I hurried everyone into the car, not wanting to spend another second here. But before we left, I took one last look at the property. Everything I'd built, everything I'd worked for over the past decade. The house we'd raised our children in, the barn I'd constructed with my own hands, the fences I'd put up post by post, the land that was supposed to provide for our family, all of it destroyed in one night by something that shouldn't exist. Then movement caught my eye at the forest edge. There, just barely visible in the shadows between the trees, the creature stood, watching us prepare to leave. It didn't advance, didn't threaten, just stood there, making sure we saw it, making sure we knew it was there, making sure we understood that this was its choice. It was allowing us to leave. We drove down the dirt road away from the farm. None of us spoke. My wife held the children tight in the back seat, one arm around each of them. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were white. I kept checking the rear view mirror compulsively, expecting to see something following. In the mirror, I saw a dark shape step out onto the road behind us, standing in the middle of the dirt track, watching our car disappear around the bend, just standing there motionless. Then, as we went around a curve and trees blocked the view, I saw it turn and walk back into the forest. Unhurried, deliberate, its job was done. We drove straight to the nearest town and checked into a cheap motel. The kind of place with thin walls and stained carpets, but it had doors that locked and we were surrounded by other people. That was all that mattered. My wife called her sister in another state, voice shaking as she tried to explain what happened. They arranged for us to come stay while we figured things out. I contacted the local sheriff to report what happened, tried to explain about the destroyed property, the dead animals. The deputy who took my statement listened with growing skepticism. When I mentioned seeing a large animal, possibly a bear, his expression said he'd already decided what happened. Bear attack, that's what went in the report. Offered condolences about the livestock. Said they'd keep an eye out, but there wasn't much they could do. No investigation planned, just another bear incident in mountain country. I called the insurance company about the property damage. They were sympathetic until I got to the cause. Animal damage wasn't covered under the policy. Acts of God and natural disasters, yes, but not animals. All those years of premium payments and we'd get nothing. The farm was a total loss and we were on our own. Days later, news reports mentioned our farm being abandoned. Other farmers in the area started reporting increased livestock losses, sheep disappearing from pastures, cattle found dead in fields, properties along the forest edge seeing damage to fences and buildings. Some people started whispering about what might be in those woods, but no one wanted to say it out loud. Saying it would make it real. We moved in with my wife's sister in a city 3 states away, started over in a place far from any forest. I got a job at a warehouse, loading trucks. My wife found work at a grocery store. The kids enrolled in new schools. We lived in a small apartment, all 4 of us crammed into 2 bedrooms. It was nothing like the space we'd had before, nothing like the life we'd built, but we were alive. But I never feel safe. Even in the city, surrounded by concrete and people, I constantly check shadows, jump at unexpected sounds. A dog barking makes me reach for a weapon that isn't there. The wind through trees sends shivers down my spine. I have nightmares most nights, waking up in a cold sweat, seeing those eyes in the darkness. The children have nightmares too. My daughter wakes up screaming about the dark shape at the windows. My son won't sleep alone, needs one of us in the room with him. They're seeing counselors now talking about the trauma. But how can a counselor help with something they can't explain? Something that shouldn't exist? My wife tries to move forward, to focus on our new life. But I catch her staring out windows sometimes, lost in thought, jumping when someone knocks on the door, checking locks multiple times before bed. The fear never really goes away. It just becomes part of who you are. I know now that something lives in those woods, something intelligent, powerful, and territorial. The creature could have killed us easily that night, could have broken through our defenses and slaughtered my family like it slaughtered our animals. But it chose terror instead, chose to drive us away, to make us understand that we weren't welcome, that we'd crossed a line. Sometimes at night, I wonder if it was personal, revenge for the bullets I put in it. Or was it just eliminating a threat to its territory? Had it been watching our farm for months, years maybe, waiting for a reason to act? I shot it, wounded it, and lived to regret it. That choice to go into the woods, to confront it, destroyed everything we'd built. We never tell anyone the full truth. Who would believe us? Giant ape man living in the forest? We'd sound insane. The physical evidence is back at the farm, unreachable now. Someone probably bought the property at auction by now, found the bones, the destroyed buildings, and came up with their own explanations. Bear attack most likely, that's what people would want to believe. Sometimes I think about going back, proving what happened, bringing cameras and proper weapons and hunting that thing down. But then I remember those eyes in the darkness, the intelligence behind them, the message in those arranged bones. Some things are better left in the shadows. Some mysteries shouldn't be solved. Late at night, I still wonder, was it the only one in those woods? Creatures like that don't live alone. There must be others. How long had it been watching my farm before attacking? How many families live on the edge of those woods right now, not knowing what's watching them from the trees? Did my gunshots heal, or does it still carry the scars? Does it remember me? Most importantly, if I hadn't shot it, would it have just taken the cow and disappeared? Would we still have our farm, our animals, our life? Was pursuing it into those woods the moment everything went wrong? Questions that will haunt me forever. Years have passed now. We've built a new life here in the city. The kids are doing better, the nightmares less frequent. My wife smiles sometimes, genuine smiles. We don't talk about what happened anymore. It's an unspoken agreement. Some memories are too painful to revisit. But I occasionally see stories online, blurry photos of something in the woods, unexplained sounds recorded by hikers, missing livestock from farms near forests, always from remote areas, always the same pattern, something big, bipedal, intelligent. I never comment on these stories, never share my own experience, but I know those woods, those deep, dark forests that people never fully explore. Something lives there, something old, something dangerous, something that's been there long before humans cleared the land and built farms. Something that doesn't appreciate us encroaching on its territory. I was lucky to escape with my life. My farm, my livelihood, my peace of mind, small prices to pay because the alternative was far worse. The creature could have killed us all that night, could have torn through our defenses and ended us, but it chose to let us live, let us run. I don't know if that was a mercy or something else. Maybe it just wanted us to spread the word, to warn others. Every time I close my eyes, I see those arranged bones in the dirt. A warning, a reminder, it let us live, but only because it chose to. We were nothing to it, just trespassers in its territory. Our farm, our animals, our lives, all meaningless compared to its claim to that land. My advice to anyone living near those deep forests: if you hear strange sounds at night, if your animals start acting scared, if you find tracks that don't make sense, get out. Don't be curious, don't investigate, don't think you can protect what's yours, because sometimes what's in those woods is stronger than you, smarter than you. And if you threaten it, it won't just kill you. It'll make sure you understand what real fear is first. I learned that lesson the hard way. I'm only here to tell this story because something in those woods decided to let me live. I don't know why. Maybe it enjoyed watching us run. Maybe it wanted someone to spread the warning. Maybe it just didn't want to waste energy breaking through our walls when it had already made its point. All I know is this: those woods are still there. That creature is still there. And other families are living on the edge of that forest right now, not knowing what's watching them, not knowing how close they are to losing everything. I hope they're smarter than I was. I hope they read the signs and leave before it's too late. Because once you've seen what I've seen, once you've looked into those eyes and felt that primal terror, you never really escape. You just learn to live with it, with the knowledge that monsters are real, that they're out there in those dark places humans avoid, watching, waiting. And if you're unlucky enough to cross their path, you better hope they decide to let you go. Because if they don't, no one will ever find your body. You'll just disappear into those woods, become another statistic, another missing person that the authorities blame on getting lost or animal attacks. Your family will never know the truth, and that thing will go back to watching, waiting for the next person who makes the mistake of wandering too deep into its territory. This is my story, my warning. I don't expect anyone to believe it. Most people won't. They'll think I'm crazy, making excuses for business failures or trauma. That's fine. But for those living near the deep woods, for those who've heard things they can't explain or seen tracks that don't make sense, for those whose animals act scared for no reason, listen to your instincts, trust your fear, and get away before you end up like me. Lucky to be alive, but forever haunted by what lurks in the shadows. For more interesting stories, check this out.